Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we are reviewing books of every genre, looking for the best of fun escapist books. And today we're doing a murder mystery. We're doing The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. And before I get into the plot, because normally the first thing I do is give you the plot, I'm going to talk about the thing that makes this book unique. This is a self-insertion book. So Anthony Horowitz is the author, and he makes himself as the main character in this book. So if you know anything about fan fiction, in fan fiction there's a trope called Mary Sue, and that is when the author decides to put themselves in the book. They don't necessarily use their own name, but it's really clearly the author, and it's usually a wish fulfillment type of thing, like I go into Harry Potter and all the characters love me and I solve all the problems and I become the best witch or wizard in the world. That is a Mary Sue. So this is a Mary Sue book. So the author, right at the beginning, and he does it from first person, and he does a lot of things that are about himself, true to real life. I mean, it's Anthony Horowitz in the story, and he says he loves Sherlock Holmes and has always wanted to write Sherlock Holmes. Well, this is essentially a Sherlock Holmes story, very blatantly, with a different character being Sherlock and Anthony being Watson. So this is a fan fiction of himself as Watson. It is the weirdest thing ever. I mean, I've never seen a professional book do that kind of thing. I'll talk more about this in a second, but I want to point this out because this isn't a first person. This is self-insertion, a Mary Sue book, and it is the weirdest thing ever. It's kind of mind-blowing in some places where you're just like, it almost throws you out of the story because of this, because you're like, wait, is that true? Did that really happen? Did you really have a conversation with Steven Spielberg? Or is that just a fictional part of the story? And you kind of wonder about some of these things. Okay, so let me get on to the plot, the thing that I usually start with. So it starts out, chapter 1, a lady walks into a funeral home and says, I would like to plan a funeral for myself, and then 6 hours later she's murdered. And the detective in this, the Holmes detective, Sherlock Holmes detective, is a man that is a consultant for the police, and he approaches Anthony Horowitz and says, I would like you to write a book about me. So follow me around as I investigate this crime and write the story. So, just like Watson, he gets up and follows the detective around investigating this murder. And you find all sorts of things, what's going on with her past, her son's past, the past of all these other peripheral characters that might be involved or might not. You know, what's up with the cleaning lady and her lawyer and the theater manager and all sorts of people. You know, what secrets are they hiding? Just like a typical murder mystery. So that is the plot, is these two characters, the detective and the writer, figuring out and solving a murder. It's very meta. So meta, by definition, is the data about the data. It's information about the information. And that's there's a lot of that going on in the book, where it feels just, the author talking about things that he's writing about. And let me give you an example of that. So again, coming back to that self-insertion Mary Sue thing. Okay, so the author talks about the main character as, he's like, okay, if I'm going to write about the main character, I need to know about the main character. And so as he gets to know the main character, he doesn't always like the main character. So one of the things that the main character is he is against gay people. And you have not the writer, Anthony Horowitz, but the detective. So the detective is against gay people or gay relationships or something about that. You don't really get a lot of details. He just is viscerally opposed to that kind of relationship. And the author disagrees with that. So Anthony is like, you shouldn't have that kind of attitude. And he doesn't go on a big preaching lecture, which I was expecting. So I was actually really impressed he didn't go out and lecture us, the reader, about his worldview. But he does do this thinking process. And he goes, I cannot write a book where the main character is against gay people. I just can't do that. That's totally inappropriate. It, would be ripped apart by the people out there. You could have a blind detective or an OCD detective or a black alien detective, but you can't have somebody who is offensive and bigoted. And so he's like, I can't do that. Should I change the character? Well, then that's not authentic anymore. So what do I do about this? And he kind of muses about this. So think about this. The author has created a character that is anti-gay, and then thinks about the fact that he cannot have a character that's anti-gay, but he has done it. I mean, it's just this kind of weird, convoluted inception thinking process that he has gone through that is written in this book about something he is actively doing. It's just kind of mind-blowingly weird, and it kind of throws me out of the story because I'm sitting there going, what? But it's kind of unique, and in some ways I kind of liked it, and in some ways I kind of didn't. It was just so very different. Very different. Okay, so that's kind of that thought on good and bad and ugly about the self-insertion thing. It can kind of be funny. Okay, good. The mystery itself, the author did a great job on that. He is apparently really good at writing murder mysteries. He's done a bunch of TV shows like Foyle's War and Midsummer Murders and others. He's been involved in TV productions. And so the plotting out of a murder, he did a great job. You do not guess who the murderer is by the end. There are some things leading to certain conclusions that I was kind of like, I think I know what's going on, and I was totally wrong. And I like that. So there was some red herrings there. He did a good job. There are some clues to who the actual murderer is. Most of them are pretty subtle. Like I didn't pick up on them. Even being told them at the end, where the clues are found, was not necessarily something that would be super obvious. Some of them are maybe like a reference to a Shakespeare play that's very subtle, that you're like, what exactly is that leading me to believe? So some of them are very subtle. But they, again, by the end, you're like, okay, there were clues. Theoretically, you could have figured out the murder. So good job, author. Unexpected, but good. The things that I dislike, however, so the author, I think, does a better job, perhaps, of a screenplay that he does in a novel, in the sense that he does a little bit too much telling rather than showing on some things. And he doesn't, I kind of felt he was kind of hypocritical. So the author, as himself in the book, keeps approaching our main detective and going, I need to know more about you. Like, I need to know about your wife and your kids and what you had for breakfast. I need to flesh you out as a character. He's haranguing the guy, poking at him, and the detective really doesn't, he gives him bits and pieces, but really doesn't want to talk about it, his personal life. But I think that's kind of funny because the author himself does not give personal details about himself. He kind of feels a little bit blank slate, because all you see is him dealing with the detective. It's like all the questions he asks the detective to answer, he doesn't answer about himself. I kind of, maybe there's some irony, maybe that was intentional, but I did feel that was kind of weird, that he doesn't flesh out the characters very well. I also will say I didn't necessarily like our main characters. I actually liked the detective better than I liked the author. And partially that's because of that Sherlock Holmes attitude. He's very intelligent, so you can respect his intelligence. He's antisocial, but being a fan of Sherlock Holmes and knowing Sherlock Holmes, I felt like that was true to the original character. So despite his antisocial, antagonistic, sometimes blunt or rude actions or attitudes, I didn't mind that as a character because I felt it was true to the original character, and I felt like it came across as a social disorder or a neurological disorder or something along those lines, a divergent personality, and so he is true to that personality. However, our main author character doesn't feel like it has that excuse. He comes across as pretty judgmental, especially towards our detective, and unkind a lot, kind of, mentally thinking mean things about others. So I didn't end up actually liking Anthony Horowitz as a person in the book. And now, I don't know how much that is true to his real life personality, because he may have been trying to make himself more of a caricature to be put in the book. I don't know. I don't have any way of knowing that. But I didn't end up liking him. So as something, it's not a big deal. He can be a character you don't like. Murder mysteries, you're not supposed to like most characters, but you tend to want to kind of like the heroes, the people solving the murder mystery, and I didn't really. So there's that. Overall, however, I would actually give this book a thumbs up. It was so different that I thought it was very original. And I thought the murder mystery, which is the most important part, was well done. It was good. There's a lot of, by the end of the book, you're like, if the author had wanted to cut out all the rabbit trails, all the red herrings, you would have had a really tiny book, but it probably wouldn't have been as much fun. It was fun to go through and find all the things out at the end. There's a little bit of action at the end, kind of a little bit of grossness at the end of that didn't feel very realistic. There is some things in there that weren't as interesting. It kind of felt like that Anthony Horowitz thought the audience wanted a lot more information about his professional career as a writer, working with famous people on a bunch of things, than I personally, because I didn't know who this person was, I personally don't care about his interactions with Steven Spielberg. So he did a little bit more on that kind of thing than I think I would have cared about, but somebody who's a fan would probably be like, this is fascinating, almost a little bit of autobiography going on here. Whatever. This is the first in a series. It looks like there's a bunch more with these two characters, the detective and the author, and I don't have a huge interest in reading more about it, mostly because some of the setup, this is a very standalone book. You can read this, and which I did, read it and be totally satisfied with the ending, not feeling like, oh, I need to get to the sequel or that kind of thing. But if you really liked the detectives, you could go on and do more. But one of the reasons why I'm less excited about that, one of which is that unique trope of the self-insertion. I don't think I would like a whole bunch of that. I think that would be kind of it would start getting old. But also partially, the author makes it very clear that he wants to correct the detective on his bad think, his wrong think attitudes. And he does not do that in this book, but it kind of leaves it open to the fact that he will in future books, and I don't want to be part of that. So I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not excited about a sequel, but I liked this as a standalone book enough to highly recommend it. I feel like if you're somebody who likes murder mysteries, that you would find this very different, very interesting. So I am going to recommend it by itself. Okay, my next book is going to be Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie Holmberg. So this is a cozy fantasy. I don't have a book to hold up because I've been doing it digitally. It is the first of a series, a fantasy one. It has light romance, it looks like. It looks like it's about world building. The home is enchanted in some way, and they're trying to tame the home. And that sounds like a lot of fun. So that's going to be my next book. I hope you will join me, and thank you for watching.